Yeah, I guess just to quickly final the one thing I couldn't really maybe I did address it and this friend of mine wasn't accepting it as a response, but uh, they're saying like, what do I actually do in terms of jhana? And all I could really say is practice satipana patana because it really does feel like it's a shedding off. It's not like
Yeah.
a. So I didn't know how to respond to what do I
Even
do.
that, like people have these preconceived notions about what is satipatthana, you see, and they're using preconceived notions to analyze another preconceived notion, and then yeah, it's going to take a long time to explain things. And if you give them the more intuitive short answers, a lot of people find it just to be so um like different than what they're used to. It's very little chance they are receptive to it.
I guess maybe I got lucky to run into you before I'd really understood it. But is it really just so like because it's less than what they're describing and less than what they're is that a good way to explain it? Because it's like there's all these additional layers of complexity in the other ideas of jhana when it seems like what you're teaching is so much pared down in a way.
Um, I guess less and more at the same time, right? Because it's not just about how in what they say there's somehow an essence of jhana laying therein, right? And they just have to get rid of the outer layers. It's not necessarily the case. It could be that they were talking about something that's just qualitatively different. Yeah, it depends on how people understand it. And um, some of the easiest ways to get into jhana is to attain relaxation in body and in attitude and perception. So when it comes to the body, your body relaxes. And then when it comes to the attitude, you look at all experiences in such a way that you harbor zero desire to accumulate them, for example, right? Or you look upon our experiences with the intention of not wanting to become intoxicated by them. Um, I personally find this to be a familiar experience because when I was younger, I suffered from limerence, right? And I then realized that that was the time when I began to meditate more intensively. I realized that the reason I suffer limerence so easily is because whenever I come into contact with girls, I'm not wearing any sort of mental armor. I just blindly flow with the habits. And my habit is as soon as I'm in contact with someone that I find appealing, I immediately allow myself to become intoxicated. There's a sort of mental predisposition, right? And then I could do the reverse. I could shield the mind so I don't allow myself to be intoxicated. To me, that really felt like putting on an armor of equanimity when you're exposed to the experience. And the fascinating thing is that I was almost transformed overnight. It was like in such a short period, I went from someone who was extremely vulnerable to limerence to someone who come to clearly see the nature of romantic relationship. That happened in such short order. So much disillusion, like disenchantment that I experienced just by doing that one little thing, not allowing myself, attitude wise, I'm not allowing myself to become intoxicated.
But
The body is relaxed. Yeah.
I guess I feel like this in between phase where it's like, well, my girlfriend's here. Even if I'm just holding her hand,
Yeah.
I like on the one hand, it's incredibly pleasant, but it also like I viscerally feel it's painful, in a way that's like I know I'm holding on to this. So
Yeah.
I guess I don't, because I can feel that I'm drunk. It's not
Yeah.
that I'm unaware but it's I don't know.
Yeah. What you can do potentially is you could tell yourself that, all right, you know what? Um, I am going to experience a pleasure, but then I am going to see if I could become secluded from all these other additional activities. including like, allowing the imagination to run wild
I
while
don't.
you're experiencing that pleasure, right? So on the other hand, if you were to tell yourself, I don't want that pleasure. I don't want that pleasure to enter into my experiential field. What will likely happen next is that your mind will rebel. Your mind will go, wow, I'm missing out on such a fun, such a pleasurable activity. There is this, you know, attractive human being who's reciprocating my feeling, and how can I not take advantage of that? And you're like, the will to practice is fighting against another much more powerful, much better entrenched will. The first will lose out. You can't trust will like that. You have to find a way where, um, like, you're not just relying on willpower. You're creating an environment where the more useful intention are more likely to stay on longer, and then they are transmuted in a way so that they can become more compatible with the will that you try to get rid of. Yeah. So it's the same thing with regards, you could use eating as an analogy. So you're eating, right? You go, okay, I'm going to practice satipatthana eating. So does this mean that I'm going to stop visiting my favorite frozen yogurt place? Does this mean that I'm going to stop, like having, like going to this favorite taco joint, whatever the case might be? If you start out like that, chances are you will not be able to proceed any further, right? So instead, you go, all right, fine. There's pleasant experience, and I notice that I'm inclining towards that pleasant experience, right? Now, with regards to this inclining, when I incline really hard, like I can't wait to be at the frozen yogurt place, right? You give more attention to the fact that there's straining in you. And that straining is actually getting in the way of pleasure. Right? We want pleasure. Okay, fine. And as you're eating frozen yogurt, you notice how, you know, there are two flavors you put in the cup, right? And then you're eating one flavor and you're already looking at the second flavor and you go, that one must be even better. I can't wait to be there. Right? Like right now, I'm going to swallow this portion very quickly. There's all these subtle mental activities are working, and you're just more aware of how the mind is exerting itself and how that exerting is getting in the way of your enjoying the present moment. And if you do that, you will, like allow your mind to satisfy its curiosity, um, and as it's satisfying its curiosity, it will grow mature. It will learn from the experience. If we don't do this and we just keep going through the motion of chasing down sensual pleasure, however many sensual pleasures you ended up experiencing, it will not make you wiser. Right? So wisdom is not a function of, oh, the Buddha has slept with hundreds of courtesans before he renounced, and therefore he was in a better position. He is more willing to renounce sensuality, right? He slept with more women than us, and therefore it doesn't work that way. You could being exposed to more sensual pleasure can potentially mean that you are just that much more addicted to sensual pleasure. It's not a guarantee that you will be, in a better position to feel disenchanted towards sensuality. Yeah.
No, no different in the same way as like when you've described like listening to music, there's so much excess that can be
Exactly.
uh,
Exactly. If you are able to, okay, so here's another way of describing it. Inherent in all pleasurable experience is peace. And you're always checking up on whether or not the way you're enjoying this pleasure is interrupting that peace. Okay. To elaborate out a little bit more, in the end, the reason we want a pleasurable experience is because we want the peace. Okay. We don't know yet, but that's really what we want, right? We think, we think that I want to spend the rest of my life with my girlfriend. That's what I want. When in fact, what you want is the resolution of the pining. Oh, if I could spend more time with her. Not being with her is painful. And you want the resolution of that. So you're looking for peace. And can peace coexist with pleasure? Yes, potentially it can. Potentially, right? So you allow yourself to enjoy pleasure, but you're always checking up on, does the peace gets interrupted or compromised as a result of the way I enjoy pleasure? That would be a very good measure. You use this measure, and I could almost guarantee you that you cannot become addicted to things.
Thank you.
And when you experience things in such a way, pleasure feels like icing on the cake. It's nice to have it. It's optional. I mean, if you have a choice, fine. All right, put icing on the cake. But do you want icing on the cake? It's okay.
Dr. Chu,
Yes.
how does boundless consciousness lead to liberation?
Okay. When you use it to quench craving, then it leads to liberation. If you don't use it to quench craving, then it doesn't necessarily lead to liberation. So how do you use it to quench craving? One of the reasons I recommended you're experimenting with balanced consciousness. Right? It is not that so you're stuck there all the time, you want to abide there 24 hours a day. It's not that. It's just so that you could have a better sense of what it's like to be very close to peace. That peace is an inherent feature of experience. Peace is right here. Peace is always experienced right here. Right? When we think about peace, we think about it oftentimes as a goal, something that we want, something that we want to strive after. When you practice any one of the formless perceptions, you're training yourself to see that, what is awareness? Awareness is not a thing. Awareness is just this. It doesn't require you're trying to send out your attention somewhere, lend it somewhere, to really zoom in on some special thing, to locate, to identify something in your experience, to unearth it, to dig it out, to do something elaborate. But rather you recognize how easily accessible the immediacy, the instantaneity of peace. That's what it's for. That's it. So if you could practice boundless consciousness, even very superficially, right? And then you're getting a sense of that. Oh, I can quiet down very easily. It feels natural for me to quiet down. It doesn't require a lot of like forceful effort. I need to concentrate on this. I need to focus on that. These elaborate visualization. It largely serves its purpose. It's largely served its purpose. And you're in the habit of just looking at your experience as like a go-to. It's very easy for you to just look at your experience. It doesn't require you cocking the eyes. It doesn't require you frowning. It doesn't require you to go into like a study mode, like a detective mode, right? You could really just sit back, relax, be at ease. It's like you're laying into this sofa, this couch of awareness. And your mind is still perfectly lucid. And then using that as a foundation, you can what? You can look at things like selfing. I am. Right now, if I were to ask you, hey, are you there, Jared? You know, of course I am, right? And you look at this experience. Of course I am. There's this regarding, there's this thought. Maybe there's a little mental picture. chair wearing glasses, looking at these are their silhouettes. This is a sitting posture, and then my attention is shooting out from the center of my brain and then sending it out to the contour of the body. I'm examining this person. You're witnessing all these things. You're experiencing all these things. You go, oh, this is what is called selfing. And you're coming from this place of natural, uncontrived awareness. And you're looking at this. What is I am? What is this selfing? And you'll be able to see it's an activity. And the more you expose the selfing experience in the light of natural awareness, the more of the conceit's fabricatedness is revealed. Its lustriness is revealed. Its silliness is revealed. You will like directly experience, you are peace. You are not disregarding. You're not Jared. Even when you say you are peace, it's a little, it's really for heuristic purpose. I say that. You don't even need to think that. It's like the mind is just super quiet. It has zero need to be someone. And yet it is fully capable of witnessing this regarding activity taking place. And you see its silliness. You see its exertion. You see its dukkha. You do this with enough uninterruptedness for short time, maybe half a day. You be like a changed person. You go into samadhi like this for 2 hours. Right? Even if your satipatthana is far from perfect, that's okay. But there is sufficient intensity. And you do this for 2 hours. You'll be a changed person. And from there on, it feels like your mind just inclines towards that which is unfabricated. It's this inner rest that is not anyone. That is always there. And you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to, oh, did I lose it? Can I bring it up? Okay. Your mind just naturally grows tired about search, about construction, about attachment. It just wants to rest.
Dr. Chu, can I have a question?
Yeah, please.
So you just say that the mind's at rest, but thoughts still there, right?
It potentially can, but then if you really becomes very consistent in cutting off your ties with thoughts, meaning that you're just not fascinated with the contents of thought. You're just not delighted in the activity of chasing down thoughts. Then over time, it is very likely to be the case that thoughts will subside. You will frequently abide in states where there are no thoughts, where there's only profound quietude inside. It's a subjectively very pleasant feeling. And even with regard to that, you're not attached.
I understand.
Even with regard to that, you're not turning it into another self. Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
I understand, but the thoughts I never have experienced where no thoughts for longer times, just in a short period of time, but like
it's hard if you have a busy schedule to keep. It's hard. If you have a relatively leisurely life and you have the proper instruction, it's not a hard task. Yeah.
I tried that before to see if I can quiet down the thoughts, but then it won't be that long.
By the way, Venerable, it's okay if there are thoughts remaining, right?
Right.
It's even better if there are no thoughts, where you could experience the deep, the profound beauty of thoughtlessness, right? So that's not the most important part, right? The most important part is whether or not you're very clear about weaning off passion towards thoughts, right? There's zero desire about mingling with thoughts. There's zero desire about, I am the one who produces this, like turning it into a me and my business. Right? It's just this nonchalance, this indifference, this readiness to rest, to just let go of everything, right?
Yes.
And you find the letting go to be much easier than to continue samsara. In the past, you had this little debate with me. You know, I said in the class that nibbana is easier than samsara. I recall, right?
No, because
And you,
well,
I don't mean to. It was meant as a joke. Don't
yeah,
take
yeah.
it seriously, venerable. I don't mean that as a way of assessing
No,
your
I
understanding.
understand. It's
But
okay.
yeah,
But the thing is, because I don't believe the stage where peacefulness, that quiet is internally quiet. I don't believe that the stage of nirvana, because I thought I
it's
would say,
not necessarily nibbana, but nibbana could oftentimes accompany deep silence, deep quietude.
because I thought like nirvana, when we once we enter nirvana, we're not going to go jump back and forth, so our mind is not going to have affliction again, like,
Right.
you know.
But
So
in
but our
arahats,
mind still
you're
have that
absolutely right in that
free.
regard. You're absolutely right in that regard. So nibbana is not measured by episodic events, right? The
Mhm.
coming and going of something. So nibbana is not about, oh, have you ever experienced this kind of happiness? Have you ever experienced this kind of light? Or have you ever experienced this kind of emptiness, and this emptiness comes and go, right? It's never about that. But then at the same time, arahats, right? They're frequently described as dwelling in an empty place, mentally speaking. When the Buddha was asked what his mind is like, what is his favorite abode? You know, when people ask him what is your favorite abode, it means how do you, uh, where do you live up here? And the Buddha says, emptiness is my abode.
Emptiness, yes, yes,
Emptiness is my abode.
yes. Because there was a great monk, a great master, that very famous master, in a Vietnamese famous master. And before, his technique was to look at thoughts, just let go of thoughts. If thoughts come in, let go. But
Yeah,
like at the end, he say that's not right, because then our mind just abiding to thoughts. So he said, no, don't abide to thoughts, but abiding to peace, like
it might not be a correct
emptiness.
technique for some people.
Hmm.
It might be the right technique for others. There
Hmm.
are people who listen to that instruction and they become attached to the state of thoughtlessness, right? But then there are also those people who, upon hearing that, not only do they relinquish passion towards thoughts, they relinquish passion towards any sort of mental activity, including the activity of preferring quietude. They even surrender that. And how do you describe that? And in arahats, inner world is really frequently characterized as there's nothing. Right? If you insist on describing, this is such profound beauty, no burden, no definition, no need to be anyone. Right? There's no, you're not like, your usual self, always situating yourself. This is where I am in the storyline. This is what I needed to do. This is where I am. These are the duties associated with where I am, and so forth. All those are completely let go of. No weight is experienced. Happy, happy, happy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dr. Shu, could I ask something very specific that I'm sure was intentional, but back when you were teaching in person, I would notice that whenever you open a door, there was some sort of conscious action as you would go through it. I'm curious if there is some kind of like practice behind that.
Some sort of conscious.
Maybe I was projecting something onto that, but I thought I saw that like as you were walking through a door, it was almost like you were having some sort of like volition or like intentional reminder or something like that, like using it as like a reminder of mindfulness bell kind of thing. I don't know. I was just curious about it.
I've long grown very, very tired of any notions of doership, any notions of maintaining intention and so forth. So the best way to describe it is I become so lazy that I don't even bother raising thoughts. Yeah. But maybe some old habits linger, and yeah, I wouldn't think too much about it.
I guess I'm wondering if like in an earlier phase of practice, you do need those kind of like intentional.
It can potentially be helpful if you make it your goal to be vigilant about any sort of activity that is taking place. So I used to spend, many days just absorbed in, for example, physical activity. I would do walking meditation and then be completely absorbed in the sensations. And sometimes I would like come out from the concentration. Ooh, wow, this is where I am. Yeah, of course, I was walking in a safe environment, right? There's very little chance that I walked into the street and get hit by a car or, like fall into a ditch or anything like that. I was like walking back and forth in a relatively uneventful environment, right? And so I could afford to really just become singularly absorbed in sensations. Yeah, and just being aware of the mental exertion behind every activity.
So in that kind of controlled environment, whether it's like formalized sitting or walking on a walking path, it's that level of like almost forgetting or
Yeah.
effortlessness that we should
Yep.
strive towards.
That would be a very, very useful one. I mean, if you just practice satipatthana, who knows how long you're going to endure the practice. Whereas if you enter into samadhi with satipatthana, you will like almost like instantaneously become transformed. Yeah.
And that's something you can't really do in day to day, or like in your active.
Maybe not for a lot of people. It depends on how you set up your environment. Everyone's different, right? I mean, I defied my mother's injunction about becoming an illustrious doctor and blah blah blah. And right, my mother was, she once told me, among Asian parents, I'm very open-minded. I'm giving you a choice. You could either become a doctor or a lawyer, right? That's like very typical of Asian parents, right? And then I remember this was like, maybe more than 30 years ago, 30 some years ago, I told her, um, I want to get into a line of work where I would have all the free time in the world. Right? This goes to show how unproductive yeah, professors, at least the sort of professor I am, right? Um, and then I was very clear about how I'm willing to trade off relatively higher salary, like better name recognition and so forth. What I really wanted in my line of work is stability and leisure, right? So if somehow I'm fortunate enough to have intelligence, who have skills, talents, and so forth at my disposal, then I want to, uh, apply them so that I get these things. These are very specific things I want in life. Yeah. Relative security and leisure, a lot of free time. And if
I
you have that, it's relatively easy to go into samadhi. If your line of work is, say, for example, you have to look at monitors and think about how stock rises over the period of a single day, I don't imagine that, you could be as physically relaxed as I was. Yeah.
But I suppose like that level of samadhi that you're talking about, even in such a maybe it's easier to transition into it, but it feels like if you're like so dropping off everything but sensation, it
Yep.
requires some sort of like almost thoughtless activity, like physical.
Better yet, it requires some level of right view already. You are already deeply renunciant, meaning that you're so ready to let go of experiences, including mental activities. So for you, surrendering mental activities is not a scary thing. but it is something that you trust in. You believe that when you surrender, you end up with, say, greater completeness or freedom or deeper rest, whatever the case might be. Right? There's a conviction on your part, so you're not afraid to just thoroughly cast things off. If you hold that kind of attitude in life, chances are you'll frequently experience peace. There are people who have a hard time meditating. They can't sit up, in a specific posture. So they say, well, is there a way to go around that? I say, yeah, try the following method. In everyday life, just hold this attitude in your mind. Nothing is ownable. Whether it's a feeling, whether it's a thought, whether it's an intention, whatever you experience, or whatever you notice, just remind, not ownable. And you're not just saying this to yourself, but you're holding an attitude like you really are going through life not being able to own any of these things. Right? So hold this mindset firmly. And then some of my students come back and tell me, wow, we never meditated. We were never able to successfully meditate. And then, in the course of that day, the mind frequently goes into just deep peace.
Dr. Chu,
Yeah, please.
for mindfulness, that what Jack just mentioned, I think like for me too. Sometimes like I try to get my lifestyle less busy and let work, but sometimes I'm in the position where I cannot. So I try to, for example, if I can let go of everything, then I can live an easy life. If I live an easy life, I really build my a good habit of not doing much. Then I don't have to be mindful so much. I just do it as its goal. But
Yeah.
no, in real life, it's not. For example, if I'm doing some on the monitor, and sometimes I need to mute, and I have to be mindful if it mutes before when I do something, make some noise or something. Otherwise, it will interfere with my work. You see, so I need to put some intention to that. So
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
mindful in every step that I do, and it's tiredness. It's
Yeah, there are so many variables at play, Venerable. So, it's not a single formula that would just work for every single person, right? So, the reason that the Buddha recommends an empty house, wilderness, right, a place with no other human beings, right, and you go there to retire yourself at least for a portion of the day. It's not necessarily a case, forever you're just going to live there and never interact with people. In fact, that's probably a bad idea. We're social animals, right? So, but then you delight in the opportunities where you don't have to mingle with other human beings. You are someone who could really enjoy solitude. You know how to enjoy solitude. That's kind of like a prerequisite. And then also, um, on the one hand, you could do something to change your objective environment so that environment becomes a little more quiet, a little more conducive to spiritual practice. Yes. But then on the other hand, it could also be that as you progress in meditation, um, you you find it easier to change your physical environment because, say, for example, you find it easier to say no to people, to turn down requests, to go against conventional wisdom, to defy traditional expectations, mores, and so forth, right? So it used to be that for me, it was very, very hard to say no to my mother, right? It was very, very hard for me to defy the dictum of filial piety, right? But then I really believe that it's through repeated experiences of mental quietude that you no longer buy into the sanctity of rules and conventional wisdom. What you previously treat as sacred now you could like comfortably say no to it. Right? It used to be that, we want to conform to peer pressure. People will say, hey, look at you. If you live on your own, you're Hinayanist, right? Like you've forgotten your bodhicitta when you're starting to practice and so forth. And then you increasingly don't spend any energy at all in trying to vindicate yourself, in trying to defend yourself, and trying to preserve any sort of image. You increasingly don't. Right? And then that can translate into a change in physical environment. And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean that therefore, if you find yourself in a very busy, distracting environment, it is because you're spiritually unaccomplished, because you're unwise. I'm not saying that. Okay, I understand that karma works in mysterious ways. Sometimes some of us, we just end up, like in situations that's beyond our control, beyond help. And then we have to still make do of the situation. As a meditator, we make do of whatever is happening. However lousy you think the situation is, you don't complain. You don't allow yourself to go into a pessimistic mood. You don't allow any sort of non-constructive emotions to arise. You deal with that in the most constructive way possible. Right? But that shouldn't just detract you from making objective efforts in changing the environment for the better. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Chu. I have to run.
Okay. Thank you. Take care, Shaq. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Venerable.
Bye. And if there's not anything else, we could always end the session, or if you have something else on your mind, Jared.
Yeah, I might have something else if I could just
Okay.
think a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Take your time. Okay. Earlier, you were asking about the boundless consciousness. So once again, you could treat that as a practice to help you better to use natural, non-contrived awareness. And using that as a basis, you can turn to any sort of satipatthana practice. Like, for example, holding the perception that no experience is ownable. Or for example, keep looking at selfing, or the sense of I am. Keep looking at it. Any of those will work. I give you literally 100 different kind of satipatthana topics, and they will all potentially do the work of quenching the craving, so to speak. In the context of boundless awareness, you could even perform self-inquiry as a way to mitigate craving. In the past, we talked about how one way to look at craving is the mind's attempt. The craving is a mind's attempt to cross some distance. Right? There's a beautiful place out there, and you want to be there. There's a craving is the attempt to cross that distance. There's a beautiful human being over there. You want to be with her. There's a craving is the attempt to cross that distance. But then in your experience of boundless awareness, where everything is right here, whatever experience you have about distance, something being far away, something being close by, all these ideas of proximity and distance, they happen right here. The idea that, this is over there, this is over here. This idea takes place right here. And then you come back and examine craving. You examine craving from the perception of no distance, everything happening here, and see what that does to craving. That's also another technique. You see. So I'm not asking you to do boundless consciousness, in a like a repetitive way, in a deadpan way. You just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, and hoping something magical will happen. You're free to modify it if it's not producing a desired effect, or if you're not being made, more at peace and just having a more profound, more immediate experience of peace, and change that, modify that, or drop it altogether, switch to something else, right? Or to use as a foundation to help you do something else. Yeah. You don't have to stick to it like some kind of dogma. You could treat the experience of boundless consciousness as like a fleeting moment thing. For 2 seconds, you want to do this so that it kind of helps you to anchor your attention. You're brought back to what is known as immediacy. You get a better understanding of, like not sending your attention out, like exerting your mind in the pursuit of something, but rather kind of like allowing your attention to rest, to settle, and to dissolve into the ocean that it comes from. And from there on, you have a better sense of what is natural awareness. You can use this to do something about the quenching of craving, to target the cause that the Buddha identified as the cause of suffering. You could be very free-flowing in your style. Or you could take up, you could be more formal if you feel like it. If there are times, you feel like, oh, I just need the next hour where I really mean business, right? That's fine too. Yeah. Be gentle with yourself, but always be persistent, be patient, and be able to endure. But then, at the same time, make sure that you're properly taken care of, right? Moment after moment, you're looking after your well-being, you're relaxed, you're okay, you're well-fed, you're being friendly, gentle with yourself. At the same time, you have this attitude, one day I'm going to disband this mind, right? I'm going to totally disown it.
Yeah, having choices is, well, my meditation history, like 8 years of just like doing a technique over and over again, trying different technique over and over again. So I kind of have like that tendency, just like just like take the hammer and hit the wall.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, that can sometimes be helpful. If you know how to use it in spurts, right, and you know how to regain your balance afterwards, it could potentially be helpful. Yeah. But the best way is if you, from the get-go, know how to get the best of both worlds, right? There's a gung-ho approach, hitting the wall with a hammer style. There's an energy, there's alertness, there's like a certain passion about that, which you can gather, which you can make use of, right? And then on the other hand, you also want to make sure that you're not exerting yourself too much. You're not straining. You're not just, like staring for its own sake. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of the things I find very beautiful about the balanced consciousness practice is I learned to dissolve my attention. I've learned that I can do satipatthana in a way where I don't need to stare. I can soften my gaze, either like physical gaze or the mental, the mind's gaze. I can soften the gaze. I don't need to just like tie myself up to one object, but rather I can just lie back and just feel the sensation, feel what's going on. This is awareness. Everything is just this texture. There's nothing I can do. There's nowhere I can go without being awareness. If you know how to do this non-contrived awareness thing, it will spare yourself so much pain. in your spiritual journey. The reason that for a lot of people, practice is so painful is because you're unwittingly, without awareness, like all the time, all over long periods of time. You're doing this long periods of time, and the pressure really builds up. If you know that, understanding, realization, letting go, it doesn't require your, and make this journey very comfortable, pleasant, abiding, here and now.
Could you say more about non-contrived awareness? Is that just like dissolving attention, or is it resting in
Well,
balanced
you could treat that
consciousness?
idea as open-ended. So everyone's different. So in my case, I noticed the subtle straining, the tiny cocking of the eyes. Like when I mean business, like whenever I sit in front of a book, it immediately reminds me of my childhood experience of studying in my mother's presence. She would hold like a rod right next to me. She's ready to beat down. And by the way, this wasn't uncommon, in Asian parenting style. I was in Taiwan, right? I mean, in the United States, it would have been illegal, but in Taiwan, it was very common. So a lot of Asian kids, we grow up, as soon as people say, buckle up, right? Or, work hard, study hard. There's a certain sensation, there's a certain inner constriction that takes place. And I notice how that happens when I try to meditate. And that constriction is getting in the way of my experiencing more thoroughgoing type of ease. And I use that as a basis, and then I go, well, am I constricting myself in other ways? There's subtle, other ways. And then I notice how, for example, there's a desire in me. I want to be there. I want to go into this special state. People tell me how great meditation is, right? So I imagine what it's like, and I'm yearning for it. And this yearning, like, oh, if I can only be there. There's a subtle complaint in my heart that goes, I've practiced for so many years, and still here I am, seemingly not making progress. I see there's a little yearning going like, oh, if I can only be an arhat, if only I could be there, experiencing that bliss. And you start noticing how these straining, there are impediments, there are hindrances to your enjoying the present moment, relaxing the present moment, understanding the present moment. And yes, it's likely that our practice it will far from perfect. Like you're always experimenting, you're always tweaking and so forth. You rarely ever go into a samadhi where, oh, everything's just so nice. Those are such rare events, right? It's entirely possible, but then it's okay. Because even as you're tweaking, right, even as you're modifying, you are gaining, better understanding of what is sankhara, what is mental exertion. We look in our person and we go, okay, all right, I'm going to figure out what is mental exertion, right? And we believe that if we look at our experience in the right way, we'll just figure it out. Like a correct answer will come up, right? But that's not how this process works. It's not about your getting a concrete verbalized answer. It's this very process of exploring, this very process where you're going, what is mental exertion? You're feeling it, you're intuiting it. That will gradually pacify the exertion, you see. So if you don't get an answer, if you feel like you're confused, it's okay. Sit with that confusion, see that confusion as another mental exertion. You're doubting, I'm not getting it, or Where's the result? Keep coming back to this issue. What is the mind doing? What is the mind exerting? I mean, how is the mind exerting? Now, what is the mind exerting? How is the mind exerting? Keep going, keep coming back to this. And as you become more aware of this, your mind quiets down. You see, then you're in a very good position to understand selfing is an exertion. Attachment is an exertion. The people will tell us that, oh, we have this mental condition, we have that mental condition. It's okay. We're gentle with ourselves, but we're persistent. My mind is just as messed up as yours, Jared. You're not alone in being messed up. But the good news is that we don't have to fix it. All you have to do is stop harboring desire to own it. Stop harboring the desire to keep making connection with it. And you look at the messed up condition of the mind, and you're at peace. Sometimes you feel funny. It's like you're looking at a stranger's mind, you're looking at humanity's mind, and humans are just whacked. What wacky creature is this? You're carefully examining every sense of involvement. But that's me. Feeling close to it, feeling intimate, feeling that's familiar. Again, another exertion, another mental activity. Keep doing this gently, persistently. Mind quiets down. That doesn't take long. You go into samadhi. Throw off all distractions. Completely abandon yourself in this single-minded investigation. And when I say that, I don't mean for you to strain really hard. Don't do that, right? When I say single-minded, I mean you really let go. You're resting so completely in awareness. You're ready to cast off thoughts, ready to, throw away every belief you hold, every preconceived notion. Yes, like, what is happening? What is exertion? What is craving? Or just keep holding the attitude. None of this is ownable. Can own this, can own this, can own this, can own this. And then even regards to the sound, can own this. I can't even own that. Even the speech can own this, cannot be owned. Even the thought, I can't own anything, cannot be owned. Can own, can own, can own. And the mind becomes peace. Yeah. If doubts arises, well, actually, I'm not so sure if this could be owned. Look at that thought. Can it be owned? Right? If it is a particularly nice feeling arises, well, can this be owned? Try to own it for 10 minutes. Try to own it for an hour. And witness this inexorable change. You don't have to wait for it to change. At this moment right here, it's slipping away. Your mind loosens its grasp, its grasp, everything. If you're experiencing a thought that goes, am I understanding this? Look at the star, can't be owned. Yeah. So is that good enough for the
Yeah,
day?
that's good. Thank you. Thank you, Chu.
Take care, Jared.
You too.
Bye bye.